May I have your attention? I'm going to go through some announcements before we have a short break, and then our speaker, Professor Pavel Svetkov, will give us our after-dinner presentation. This is going to be the second month, a series of 3 months where we're going to talk about global warming solutions. This is the theme of our section this year. So I want to bring you up to date on some work that I and some of my colleagues have been involved in, the climate solutions community. On March 31st, the AIChE issued a press release about the formation and launch of the climate solutions community. This is going to be a multidisciplinary effort by engineers and industrial scientists of all disciplines. I was invited to speak to the 3 operating councils of the Institute the day prior. There are several members of those operating councils who are very encouraged on what we are setting out to do. On the first, I had the opportunity to present in a poster session, and through these efforts of talking to the council and through this poster session and a handout that we distributed, we managed to get 30 at our workshop on April 2nd, when the best that anyone hoped for was 20. So I was very happy that we had that attendance. And from that, we're in the process of developing a white paper on a path forward for our community. So, just to reiterate, and this is the first part of our press release, the Climate Solutions Community is an interdisciplinary group that seeks technically feasible and economically viable ways to mitigate, adapt, and become resilient to climate change. I know that many of you are concerned. I think that 2/3 of all engineers and industrial scientists are concerned. And this community is going to begin the work on determining what can be done that is commercially viable. And of course, it's complicated. Some solutions have a lot of infrastructure cost, and we can't go headlong into every possible solution. Well, okay. We are going to, within our section, have a session at the Southwest Process Technology Conference in October. This is a morning session, and some of you here may have gotten a request from me to help me find speakers for presentations, climate evidence, mitigation solutions, adaptation solutions, and resiliency solutions. In the white paper that I've drafted for our steering committee to review, I comment that on December 1st last year, I presented to our executive committee that I wanted to have a theme of global warming solutions, and of course you immediately go to different ways to mitigate. And someone at that meeting, and he's here today, he said, well, we probably are past the point where we can solve this through mitigation. We have to talk about adaptation. That's really where we're at. We have to move on to adaptation. But we're going to have a climate solution session at this conference. The Southwest Process Technology Conference, which has been held in Galveston recent years, will be held in Sugar Land. It was considered that maybe not that many people were interested in doing the weekend in Galveston, so let's hold it closer to home. We hope to have a greater attendance this year. We think that we might be able to reach 500 with a good promotion. So it's at this conference that we're going to have, as I say, this morning session on climate solutions. Now, I'm going to make a pitch for volunteers. We have a section that where we have some very dedicated volunteers. I'm going to ask if two people recently just contacted me sort of out of the blue and said, can I volunteer? So is Shannon Ross here tonight? No. Is Yogan Kong here tonight? Okay. Those are two individuals. I just received emails from them, and they said, we would like to volunteer. And so we have more and more new names, new faces that are helping us. So I'm going to make a call for volunteers for this conference. You'll see David Solarski in that bold middle paragraph. David, you're here. Where are you sitting? There's his hand over there. So I'm just going to highlight what a volunteer can do at the Southwest Process Technology Conference. You can help at registration. You can be a session aide for technical presentations. You can assist exhibitors. You can work the meals. You can collect event tickets. A lot of need for volunteers. And if you volunteer, you get free registration for the conference. So here's David Solarski's contact information. His email, sts-membership@aiche.org. Please contact him and let him know what you would like to do to help at this conference. We have two sponsors in our section. Silver sponsor, they're based out in San Francisco. The Business Climate Leaders, which is an arm of the Citizens Climate Lobby. Microorganic Technologies, which is in upstate New York. As I mentioned in the past dinner meetings, we are now on a 12-month rolling sponsorship. If someone joins as a sponsor today, they're a sponsor through a year from today, as opposed to the old calendar year. I'd like to thank my executive committee colleagues. If you could all stand up, please. Mark Harkness is our chair-elect. Eureka over here. Megan Spivak back there. And we don't have a forum, so we can't vote on anything tonight. Okay. Well, thank you. Our networking lunch programs are continuing to be popular. And on April 19th, we're going to have our East Side networking lunch. Eric Lathander is going to speak on a sustainable asset management and optimization program. And let me just see, I got a little pitch here. So, STEAM is an asset. It is crucial that the STEAM system be consistently managed and properly maintained. Eric Lathander will present and discuss a three-phase approach to providing plants with a sustainable asset management program that continuously improves performance of the entire system through visualization and timely optimization. One of the new volunteers that we have, Yogan Kong, is now going to lead the East Side networking lunch program. On May 3rd, our first Friday networking lunch, Mark Hordes takes the mystery out of how to determine the best organizational change management approach to pursue, saving the organization time, money, resources, and frustration through an organizational lens of manageability, risk, agility, velocity, and strategic focus resulting in sustainable business outcomes. And Connor, you're here somewhere, right? Connor Schonert? I thought I saw Connor. He is managing the West Side. Okay. Thank you, Connor. All right. Now I'd like to thank the volunteers who helped us at the HISD Career Fair on March 23rd. And let's see, so we got a few pictures there, and the Houston Scout Fair, April 6th. Let's see, I will flip through those again. So at the HISD Career Fair, we had Andreas Matsakos, I'm sorry about the pronunciation, Connor Schonert, Eureka Diaz-Bialois, and Matt Kolodny. Did I forget anyone, Eureka? Okay. So here's everyone because Matt was taking the picture. So this is all 4 of them there. And at the Houston Scout Fair on April 6th, we had Yurika Diaz-Bialois, Adam Bialois, Paul Waits, and Matt Kolodny. So let's give a round of applause to these volunteers. And one of these events, and was it the Scout Fair, Yurika? You did it, you weren't feeling that great, but you did it anyway, as I recall. That's what I've been told, so thank you very much. Now, let me ask, is anyone here from the YP board? Emily's not here. Is Srihari Maganti here? I hope one of these people's here. Swarabade? Drew Hoffmaster? Last chance. Oh, Trevor. He has to be here. He's our audiovisual guy. So maybe you can take us through. I know Holly's here.
Yes.
Holly, I'll just take this one since I met you just before. So Holly Fitch was named YP of the Month. Can you stand, Holly? So, congratulations. Thank you very much. Maybe you can take it the rest of the way. There's a few more slides.
Oh, okay. There's a few more slides.
I'll flip through them.
Great. All right. So it's been a while since I've been the YP president, but that's all right. So the YPs went and visited the PVMU student chapter on March 26th, and that was pretty great, teaching them about stuff. Our April 2019 happy hour will be at Buffalo Wild Wings on April 26th. Come out and hang out with the YPs. You go back.
Go back?
Yep. Okay.
Oh.
So every year we distribute, or we get a bunch of stuff and put it in bags and give it to students and teachers who are invited to OTC to let them learn about chemical engineering and have fun stuff to remember us by. And every year we have a bag stuffing party to stuff the bags. And this year it's April 27th, 2019. If you're interested, please contact Emily Jackson. You can get her at STS-AIChE.org, and we'll provide the address for where it is. It takes usually a few hours. The more people that are there, the quicker it goes, and we provide lunch. And next. Yes, and every year we have our annual Houston Astros game. We've decided the date will be the July 19th. Tickets are, go back. Tickets are on sale now. You can contact Emily, but we'll be sending out a mailing list email on it pretty soon. Next.
That's it.
Oh, is that it? All right. Thank you.
You can take a break now. Thank you, Trevor. So I've removed some of the events on this slide as some of them have been completed, but we still have a lot of need for volunteers. We still have a Sally Ride event, which is coming up, I'm not sure when, maybe a month or so, for K-12. Houston Food Bank, on occasion we have an event. Mentoring program, Matt Kolodny is developing a plan for a mentoring program. And I see a room full of mentors here. So at some point when we get that firmed up, we will be contacting all of you to work on our mentoring program. Energy Day, October 19th, we'll need volunteers. Registration table greeters. Yurika has been managing that all this time, but eventually we're going to wear her out. You know, we could use another. Or maybe you're already worn out.
She's still amazing.
Okay. Our newsletter takes quite a bit of work. Megan Spivak is handling that now, but she can always use a hand. Can use a hand proofing the newsletter, for example. STS website management. We we have a website, but we need a team. So certainly someone out there, or you know someone who is very good at website management. Networking lunch program management. We do have someone on the east side and west side now, but we're always looking for help there. And the Offshore Technology Conference is coming up in May, and we need volunteers for that. And so this is the information on the Offshore Technology Conference. Trevor talked about preparing goodie bags, but we need volunteers to work the conference itself. So it's going to be May 6th through 9. You get a free pass. Don't have to pay to get into the conference. You don't have to pay for parking, and you can haul away all the goodies that you can handle. And you can attend technical sessions. And Tom Menn is right over here. Raise his hand there. And Tom manages that effort. And we usually have a good turnout, but we'd rather have more people than we need. I think we barely reached the number that we wanted last year. Is that right? Okay, but it's good to have a lot of people. Say again? Well, the date's passed. Is that right, Tom? Is it the 15th? Oh, it should say the 19th. Okay. Well, thank you for pointing that out. April 19th, you need to know. Okay. All right. Right, next Friday. Friday next week. AICHE Awards nomination. Are you getting any nominations, Tom? Some? We could use... You got the... why don't you come up here? I can't hear you. Tell us what you need nominations for. Where are we short on nominations? Don't worry about it? You gotta get pretty close.
We're accepting we're accepting nominations for Best Applied Paper, Best Fundamental Paper, Best in Practice Paper, Outstanding Young Professional Award under 35. We actually got one of those in the email. We've gotten Best Paper and Best Fundamental, Best Applied Paper awards. In fact, we've gotten some that weren't eligible. Some of these guys can't understand where it says calendar year. They still send them in when it's a 2019 paper. We need the awards nominations for distinguished service and for special service awards for people who have helped out.
Those are the two we don't have any nominations?
We have nominations.
Let's go to the next one here. It's only here.
And contact me if you want to do something, or go to the website and there'll be a form there. But to nominate, you need the form. Or go to the newsletter, and there's a form there. Get the form from the newsletter.
Okay, go to the newsletter. All right, thank you, Tom. Okay, so those are all the announcements I had. Did we miss any announcements that we should have made from anyone in the audience? Okay. Our speaker tonight, we're going to go on a break, just want to announce you, Pavel, is from Texas A&M University, traveled here in all the traffic. We appreciate you coming. Now, if anyone hasn't attempted to answer our pop quiz, there are some small papers up front, and how many nuclear plants are operating in the U.S., A, B, or C? How many worldwide, A, B, or C? And then we'll have a drawing after the Q&A. And it looks like it timed out on me. We're going to take about a 15-minute break now, and then we'll 10-minute break? 10-minute break. Okay, 10-minute break, and then we'll come back for Professor Svetskov's presentation. Yes.
Check 1 2 check.
Attention, everyone. Let's take our seats. Tonight we have a special guest. I met Professor Svetkov maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I was on a search for someone who could speak on Generation 4 nuclear power. I didn't know a darn thing about it a year ago. How many here know about Generation 4 nuclear power? There's a hand. There's a couple of hands there. It's an amazing story. Professor Svetkov is an associate professor of nuclear engineering at Texas A&M. I gotta check my notes here, my cheat sheet. He served as an editor and major contributor for 11 books on energy, environment, and nuclear energy. He has 2 patents pending on reactor design and energy conversion. He published over 300 manuscripts to peer journals, conference proceedings, and reports. Professor Svetkov is a co-author of a book that I bought and haven't read yet on Generation 4 nuclear reactor design, and he is an expert in this area. Let's welcome Professor Svetkov.
Well, thank you very much for a kind introduction. Glad to be here. Certainly try to prepare my talk without much anticipation of what you guys know and what might be new. So I hope I won't be too redundant in saying things that you see every time somebody comes to talk to you about nuclear in particular. I thought I will talk about a couple of different things related to nuclear engineering. As a physicist, I do like to have some level of definition what global warming is and what it's all about. So I have a couple of slides. But in the majority, they are what we call paper-based reactors. And they certainly being such, they work really well, being paper-based reactors. So let me begin with definition what global warming and global challenge is. So it turns out that global warming and greenhouse effects do have a positive effect on all of us, right? We won't be able to survive on this planet, at least not comfortably, if the effect wouldn't be present. So we're certainly thankful for that and not being at minus 18 degrees C without the effect. At the same time, the increase in temperature and considering the population that we have and energy demand, we certainly won't be able to survive much longer if temperature is affected significantly. That being said, based on international agreements and Paris Agreement in particular, the plan is to try to limit increase in greenhouse gas emissions and temperature effects and stay below 2 degrees C, maybe at about 1.5 degrees C, and take it as a challenge and look at technologies that might, in short term, not in next 100 years, but shorter, deliver on that promise. That brings to consideration conventional approaches. That brings into the picture nuclear. And there are a couple of things to be said about nuclear and greenhouse gas emissions. Certainly, it has a promise. It has some challenges to be addressed, and that's why people consider next generation nuclear reactors. And there are emerging carbon removal technologies of various kinds, with an idea that combination of emerging energy technologies, nuclear, still new. We haven't been around for centuries, but already not that new anymore, but certainly properly operating nuclear power plant doesn't release much or shouldn't be releasing much into atmosphere. That being said, so I went on and look what actual numbers like, and indeed nuclear does come and I will talk a little bit more skeptically probably about this in next slides, but it does come across as rather clean and environmentally benign technology. And that's what originally brought me to nuclear a while back, looking at advanced energy sources that can run sustainably without much need for anything else for it to run. And when we compare human health effects, when we compare land, water consumption, ecosystem changes, certainly, again, properly operating nuclear power plant does come very, very attractive in that case. It comes nearly completely benign in terms of what it's emitting and what it's requiring for operation. That being said, so in the middle, the nuclear power plant itself certainly doesn't emit greenhouse gases and certainly doesn't produce to manufacture fuel for a nuclear reactor. And after that, after the fuel spent time in nuclear reactor and produce energy and we got electricity out of it, certainly those components do contribute greenhouse gases because most of those systems designed with conventional resources and conventional technology, and most of those systems designed 20, 30, maybe 40 years ago. And that's certainly part of the consideration behind next generation nuclear power plants and next generation interactions of the nuclear power plants with the environment as well. So they not quite like what plants look like today. The second consideration related to nuclear power plants, certainly, again, as far as mitigation potential of nuclear power within nuclear power plant, it's certainly true. At the same time, nuclear power plants are not immune to climate change and temperature fluctuations. And as this plot shows, certainly when we consider impact of climate change and temperature variation effects on contemporary nuclear power supply, which does require water for its operation, and it requires water to reject heat, and it requires water for operation, certainly as ambient temperatures goes up, if those reactors in operation, then their capacity of utilization goes down. So they certainly start losing the ability to operate. It's possible and it's conceivable that nuclear power plant designed relying on aquatic system in the long run with environmental conditions changing may end up in desert conditions and not being able to reject heat the way the plant was originally designed. So that's certainly something to consider, and that's certainly a factor in designing plants. From a nuclear technology standpoint, and I thought this is a basic slide, probably everybody knows that, but at the same time, it does show that there are two kinds of nuclear energy, right? There's a fission energy and there's a fusion energy. And everything that I talk about, except one slide behind this one, beside this one, is about nuclear fission, because this is what we figured out how to use, and we're reasonably comfortable using the technology. We can make it environmentally friendly, environmentally benign. We can address those challenges that I just mentioned about traces of greenhouse gas emissions and the rest of the nuclear industry, reliance on aquatic systems for heat rejection and things like that. The second one is still trying to catch up. The second one, the fusion nuclear, certainly is not yet in engineering domain, and I will come back to that in few slides after that. So in terms of idea, I thought I will bring this. I was not sure how familiar you guys are with nuclear power, but that's basically the general idea. So you introduce elementary nuclear particles, you make heavy nuclides split apart, and that fortunately produces quite large amount of nuclear energy. The advantage, it's a high density power source. It's high energy density power source. And as a result, it can be very, very compact. Also, because there is no oxygen consumption, it's completely autonomous. If I know how to control it, I certainly can design system entirely autonomous to the environment. And that's what makes it quite applicable for space applications, for example. We come up with nuclear energy as a very, very advanced energy, so there hasn't been anything like it in past centuries. At the same time, charged particles produced in nuclear reactions do carry electricity directly. They can be harvested, but it's difficult, and we don't do that. That would be very, very efficient, but we don't do that because engineering is difficult. We also might be able to take advantage of secondary effects that happen after we split nucleus. And we also don't do that for exactly the same reason, that it's difficult and engineering, I wouldn't say prohibitive, but it's just difficult. We're not there yet. It requires more, mostly materials research. So what we figured out to do reliably, and everybody does it, is to take advantage of the heat of energy generation coming from nuclear, and then taking energy from nuclear and using heat coming from that, use it as a conventional heat source. And as such, it works pretty well, but as any thermal energy heat source, it's certainly limited by Carnot efficiency. It requires heat rejection systems, and the less efficient I am, and current power plants about 30% efficient, they certainly need to reject a significant amount into the environment. And even so, we are not releasing greenhouse gases, we certainly are thermal polluters in terms of effects on the environment. But advantages, again, of course, high density energy source, autonomous energy source, provides quite significant amount of energy from very small amount of fuel. It's not a chemical reaction. It doesn't require oxygen for operation. Can operate for very long time without refueling, without any fuel supply. As an example, research reactors, Texas A&M has 2 of them, run on the same fuel for very long time. We have we have one megawatt reactor that runs for about 40 years on the same fuel. We also have 5-watt reactor, small one, and that reactor will never run out of fuel. Even though, obviously, power output is very, very small, but I do think it's remarkable that system will always operate for a considerable amount of time without any requirements to resupply fuel. So that's pretty unique. Certainly, because of the autonomy of operation, because we don't need oxygen or anything else except fuel, that's certainly quite attractive. From engineering standpoint, it's a highly regulated industry. We certainly felt accidents that occurred at 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima most recently. Certainly, those type of, we learn from the accidents like every other industry, and we certainly would like to make sure that this is not going to happen again, at least not the way it already happened. And of course, nuclear waste management. Nuclear power, conventional nuclear power does produce nuclear waste. It's managed, it's stored in a controlled way. We know what to do with it, but it's certainly something that needs to be addressed. And nuclear having a military aspect of that does have security implications, which make the source unique as well. So from energy supply and demand, the other consideration to bring in the picture, of course, there is a very close correlation between human development index and electricity consumption. So high efficiency, high energy yield energy sources are quite needed to sustain quality of life. And that correlates pretty closely with carbon dioxide emissions per capita. And more developed countries, countries supporting high quality of life, certainly demand more energy, and certainly they emit more as a result of that. Population is growing, and energy demand is growing, and as a result, we do see nuclear as one of the potential solutions in energy mix. Certainly not by itself alone, but as an energy mix, it certainly looks quite helpful. If we look at energy breakdown, nuclear worldwide, about 8%, roughly depends on literature source, reference source, about 8% globally. And it's certainly supplemented by, would be supplemented by renewables that would allow to minimize emissions. And we are on the cleaner side. Even with those disclaimers about the rest outside of nuclear power, we certainly are on a dramatically cleaner side to the alternative energy sources, conventional energy sources. The second component to that, and that's why I want to finish this talk on sustainability aspect a little later, is about how much fuel we actually have. Because I realized before my time, people were quite worried about running out of fossil fuel, running out of conventional fuel resources. As a result, knowing how much fuel for nuclear power is required to sustain it, it's certainly an important consideration, because you don't want to have energy source like this and then 200 years from now declare that there is no more fuel for nuclear power plants. It's certainly a commitment for a very long time. So according to estimates, and they're just estimates, for conventional nuclear power, cheap fuel resources, they are certainly limited. As we move to next generation power plants and reactor designs, the numbers grow dramatically and go to thousands of years. We essentially becoming sustainable energy source at that point. Nuclear is one of the unique energy sources, being non-renewable in principle, but being capable to produce fuel for itself, and while producing fuel for itself, also take care of nuclear waste, because what we consider nuclear waste today actually is what would become sustainable nuclear fuel in the future. So focusing on nuclear power, and again, making slowly way towards Generation 4 systems and talking about those. I already mentioned basic advantages, probably 4 of them to keep mentioning most of the time. Properly designed nuclear power plant is environmentally friendly. Certainly from energy independence and national security, it's quite attractive energy source. It's certainly resource availability there. I just showed you the numbers, but there are concerns about proliferations, there are concerns about safety, waste management, considerations that meant to be addressed by next generation and what we call Generation 4 systems. To emphasize autonomy, I thought I will compare coal plant and nuclear plant. So from a nuclear side, again, we can run without refueling for quite some time. And the current idea is to design nuclear reactors for applications that wouldn't be requiring or wouldn't be in a condition to receive supply, wouldn't be in a condition to have a lot of maintenance, but will be able to provide energy autonomously. You need a little bit of uranium. You will produce eventually fuel as you run, spend fuel as you spend that uranium and get energy out of it. But besides heat and electricity, there is not much else that needed or would be emitted by that plant. Looking at the numbers and looking at how many of these nuclear power plants and nuclear reactors we have globally, it looks pretty interesting. We certainly, as being young industry, being very complex industry, we like these numbers. We like to recognize that we have 450 units in operation globally. It's 11% of all electricity for energy source like this. It's certainly quite remarkable. Domestically, we have 98 units at this point. There are a couple of units shut down for a variety of reasons. Economics at this point, it's a subject for a different talk, but we're still producing 20% of domestic electricity. And we do have 2 new builds coming up, which is, for nuclear industry, is a good news. But outside, nuclear is quite popular. There are 61 units under construction and 149 planned. Most of it is in Middle East and in Asia. So this is a timeline that gets us to Generation 4 systems. Generation 1 were mostly early research reactors, starting immediately after World War II in support of weapons program, and also commercializing those reactors for civilian applications. In those days, people tried pretty much everything, and it's quite amazing how much innovation occurred at that time. Out of that, 2 kinds of reactors emerged. One that can boil water in itself and can run without steam generator. And the second one, which is more popular today, is that you would need steam generator to produce steam and ultimately produce electricity. Those are boiling water reactors and what we call pressurized water reactors. Canadians, because they didn't want what we call fuel cycle and produce fuel with high content of certain nuclides, they decided to go with a natural composition, and they come up with what they call can-do reactor. And can-do reactor runs on natural composition of uranium. That reactor would be a third kind because it uses heavy water compared to light water. But the commercially winning fleet of reactors is using light water. And those 450 reactors are mostly pressurized water reactors. This technology evolved over the last couple of decades, and we arrived at the point where industry is feeling very comfortable, industry being Westinghouse and General Electric, being very comfortable with their current fleet that takes light water as energy carrier, as a coolant. But at the same time, industry is looking beyond that and looking at alternatives. And this is what Generation 4 systems designed to do. Trying to address what I showed before, trying to address the rest of the fuel cycle, make sure there is no nuclear waste outside of the nuclear power plant, and power plant takes care of that automatically. So the goals for Generation 4 systems, sustainability is one, and sustainability includes environmental aspects to that. It assumed that a nuclear reactor would be capable to take care of nuclear waste. Safety and reliability, economics, security and proliferation resistance, making sure that the reactor is, by design, is secure and we don't need to worry about either safety or security of the system. So those are the goals behind thinking that we need to go beyond what current technology actually represents. Gen 4 systems, it's a 6 different reactor technologies. Every one of them has a commercial vendor pursuing the technology. Most of them, what we call fast reactors, they use high energy particles compared to thermal reactors that use low energy particles. So gas fast reactor, they use gas as a coolant, gas being helium. Very high temperature reactor is version of a gas reactor, but instead of high energy particles, it uses graphite, and the environment uses low energy particles as a result. But the coolant is still helium. The third one is by 2026, but realistically we're thinking it will come online by 2030 for the purposes of testing different materials. Then sodium obviously is not a very friendly material when it comes to interaction with atmosphere, with oxygen. So the reactors that doesn't have that issue uses liquid lead as a coolant. The last one, grown to be most popular in the last 3 years, is molten salt reactor. So all of these 5 reactors above molten salt reactors, they use solid fuel. They look like a conventional system with conventional solid components. As a result, situations that happened before when we talk about core melting accidents, core damage, and things like that, are certainly in theory possible. But the last one is essentially a bucket with a liquid fuel. It's essentially a bucket with a liquid molten salt. And as a result, there's no really chance to have those type of core damage accidents and scenarios because you already moved past them. Your core is already in a liquid form. So that's emerging technology. At the same time, just like with all other technologies on this list, that has been tried before. Oak Ridge National Lab did operate molten salt reactor successfully as part of their program in 1970s. So this is how gas-fast reactor would look like. The reactor would produce about 900 degrees C helium, and that helium would go through a gas turbine and at least theoretically get us to about 60% efficiency in Brayton cycle. As a result of that, the hope is that it's not water requiring system. The rejection is not that significant. And as a result, it certainly will produce electricity effectively. It will produce process heat for a variety of applications. Traditionally, gas-cooled systems being considered for, as energy sources for petrochemical industry. And then, because it's a fast reactor, it would be designed to use high energy particles to take care of nuclear waste. So in theory, all of this fast reactor technology is capable to be essentially taking care of nuclear waste by design by themselves. The second one is a thermal version that uses low energy particles, high temperature reactor that uses graphite and helium in combination. This one in particular started with thinking that it would have a heat exchanger and it would be designed to produce process heat for traditional process applications, for hydrogen production, for desalination, other applications like that. And then supercritical water reactor is the only one that uses water and would look like a conventional Rankine cycle-based system with corresponding efficiency there. And this is sodium fast reactor configuration. One of the attractive features of sodium fast reactor is that unlike previous systems, it is under atmospheric pressure. All previous systems and current reactors require quite significant pressure inside their vessels, about 15 megapascals. This, even though it's a liquid metal, it's challenging. It's under atmospheric pressure, and that makes operation of the system quite easy. Liquid sodium doesn't give us high enough temperatures for Brayton cycle to be effective. We're assuming that it will use heat exchanger and conventional water cycle on the secondary side. Its cousin, a lead-cooled fast reactor, on the other hand, gets us to about 800 degrees C in exit portion of it. So it does have possibility to get us through heat exchanger to secondary working fluid. That would be helium, most likely, and that would get us to Brayton cycle again. The sixth system, and this is very chlosely designed based on Oak Ridge design, when they assume that molten salt, either a chloride salt or fluoride salt, would carry nuclear fuel and will stay liquid, so that nuclear accidents involving significant damage to the core wouldn't be possible by design. This reactor also would be capable to use Brayton cycle and go for much higher efficiencies than the current nuclear power plants. Of course, current technologies, those yellow stripes, existing fleets of light water reactors and heavy water reactors, they do produce desalinated water. And there are plants that do have desalination units associated with them. As we move to developing reactors, small modular reactors that would be more adaptable to energy grid, as we move to Gen 4 systems, certainly we would move to high and higher temperature and high demanding process heat applications. From possible trends in technology evolution, and that involves both Gen 4 systems and contemporary systems. Certainly, in the short term, we're expecting that light water-based systems will stay. We have quite a number of them, and many, many more being built. We have 98 reactors here, and most of them apply to extend their license, and many of them will stay for over 100 years in operation. So that's quite certain. Intermediate term, we believe that gas-cooled units that would utilize Brayton cycle and be significantly more efficient than light water systems because of the temperature would come maybe 20, 30 years. And then in the longer term, we would move to fast reactors and also start taking advantage of second pass as far as fuel is concerned. So we can use uranium, and there's an abundance of uranium resources, but certainly thorium, which is just about as much as uranium, if not more, also can be utilized. And thorium has been tried before. It has challenges. That's why people move to uranium. But at the same time, both uranium systems and thorium systems are available and being considered. Couple of areas make nuclear really essential energy source. Navy carriers, civilian nuclear fleet, portable nuclear power for remote regions, reliable fuel supply chains, deep space missions. In those directions, nuclear is very difficult to replace. There are not very many alternatives. On the other hand, from environmental standpoint, looking at baseload electricity production, potable water, industrial heat, district heating, and minimization of greenhouse gases, certainly nuclear brings unique features that complement renewable energy supply. Coming back to fusion, certainly that would be excellent, but unfortunately, it's still decades away from engineering applications. The current timeline for fusion energy sources is to have a demonstration plant on the physics side of the machine within 20, 30 years, going next generation of the European project that's funded by 15 countries. It's quite expensive, and that demonstration plant would have energy conversion associated with that, and then potentially commercialize one way or the other. So it's quite a long time. Obviously, fission, nuclear-based industry, certainly not going to stay not evolving, and it's going to be a competition. So we're going to see how this unfolds. But it's quite a while that it will become viable. The last aspect of consideration is sustainability, and how all of this aspect of nuclear power come together. From sustainability standpoint, the idea is fairly simple: to make sure that we don't corrupt our planet, and next generations would be able to enjoy the same quality of life as past generations. And we would be able to do that on a sustainable basis. And we would expect that every generation would take that responsibly. There's the biophysical aspects to that. There's the environmental aspects. There are many, many different considerations there. We certainly have a trustee relationships, obligations. There are certainly precautions on what technologies and considerations become of value. Thinking of nuclear, it's very, very difficult anywhere in the world to consider nuclear when we need to convince people that nuclear waste needs to be buried and there should be a nuclear waste site to put nuclear waste in it, because eventually somebody will be living for millions of years next to it. Not a big site, it's about 70 metric tons today, but still somebody will be living next to it. But there is an alternative. You can take advantage of the fact that it's fuel, and if it's coming back to the reactor, then system becomes sustainable and the issue goes away. At the same time, affordability of clean energy and having baseload conventional efficient energy source that are reasonably inexpensive, aside of a financial burden to produce contemporary nuclear power plants, certainly quite attractive, limiting and controlling environmental effects. Big energy questions about reduction of emissions certainly would have to be addressed. Use of water and requirements on environmental conditions when nuclear power plants would have to be constructed and operating, certainly consideration. Consumption of other fuel resources as part of industry certainly would have to be balanced. It's intermittent, but certainly renewables do complement nuclear power. And there are scenarios when they work together quite well. From a nuclear technology side, when we look at sustainability, we consider three aspects of that together. We consider society and effects on society, we consider ecology, and we consider economy. And we base those considerations on economics, waste, safety, and security of nuclear industry. And if we count emission-free electricity, certainly in that mix, nuclear looks pretty good. It gives 70% of emission-free electricity if we focus on just nuclear power plant. So, and then coming back to uranium, to fuel resources in general, how much fuel we would have. And generally, it's a sustainable energy source, even though it's not renewable. This slide, in particular, gives an idea that with nuclear, it won't be possible to completely eliminate climate change challenge, but at the same time, the energy source efficient and explore it well enough to make substantial changes and impact on emissions and getting to 1.5 degrees C goal as temperature change in overall mix. Vendors understand that. Vendors move into advanced technologies. This is General Electric direction. Generation 3 is a current fleet. It's a boiling water reactor. They moved to evolutionary design of economical and simplified boiling water reactor, which also uses water. This would be Generation 3 Plus, and they look also on small modular reactor versions of that. And of course, they have Generation 4 advanced fast reactor. And this would be the reactor that would be expected to be built as a prototype by either 2026 or 2030, depending how on time they are. They are pretty optimistic in that regard. Westinghouse pursuing lead-cooled technology. So we have two vendors, and they traditionally go around looking at different configurations of advanced systems. It's interesting that General Electric pursuing sodium-cooled systems and is a lead vendor domestically to pursue that type of reactor. At the same time, Westinghouse is not far behind, because the last operating sodium fast reactor, fast flux test facility, was constructed by Westinghouse. There are international Generation 4 forum that comprises pretty much all major international players in nuclear. There are deployments through the end of the century and research and development efforts through the end of the century. Countries usually don't collaborate very well in various areas, but nuclear and advancements in civilian nuclear technology, it's one of the few areas. The second one would be probably space, where countries do collaborate. And looking at memberships in various subcommittees in Gen 4 forum, there's certainly quite interesting alliances that probably don't match any other for the same countries. And of course, for every Gen 4 concept, there is an international effort. This is an example for sodium fast reactor. To build demo plants globally, every country has plans to build a prototype. There were prototypes in operation in Europe, all of them decommissioned at this point, but there are plans to build new one. There's a number of reactors in operation in China, India, Russia. There was one in Japan, but the one in Japan caused some trouble and is being decommissioned with an idea that they're going to build another one after that. So it's quite attractive, it's quite exciting time as far as advanced reactor technology is concerned. It turns out, just looking at the list of Gen 4 concepts, majority of Gen 4 reactors are mostly fast reactors that use high energy particles and by design would be capable to provide the most benign environmental configurations where you would address components outside of the nuclear power plant, making sure that those wouldn't produce nuclear waste, would be advanced enough to control environmental impact. And then we're looking also at energy mix scenario, when we would look at combination of solar, nuclear, natural gas, coal working together. Nuclear traditionally considered a base load source because reactors prefer to run continuously rather than responding to energy grid fluctuations. Not necessarily, but that's a traditional way of doing things. It's certainly possible to match that with both solar and wind power when peak demands actually occur. With that, that's conclusion. I hopefully was too fast. And I would be happy to discuss all of these topics and answer questions.
So I'm going to recruit a granddaughter here. Linda, both of you stand up. I'm going to show you off. Okay, we have two granddaughters visiting us with us, Linda and Sasha. They were both born in Kazakhstan, a Russian-speaking country. When they moved to New Zealand, Linda was 2.5 and Sasha was 7 months. So Linda, if someone has a question, give the mic to them and then just wait for the next person.
Can you talk to what makes these new reactor designs safer compared to what the old designs are, like from a meltdown perspective?
Sure. So let me go back to the list of the reactors. I will stop as soon as any representative slide. So we do consider them safer, and for a couple of good reasons. So let me go to the list of reactors. So if I talked a little bit about that when we discussed molten salt reactors. Molten salt reactor is inherently uses its reactor core in a liquid form. And as a result, accidents similar to Fukushima, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl is a little bit different. It's too man-made to consider. But certainly situations when you consider a substantial damage to metallic parts in the core and melting in the core, in case of molten salt reactor, is designed out. It's not part of situations that occur. In addition to that, in other reactor types, the fuel...
Just because none of us in this room are really familiar with the nuclear reactor design. So can you just elaborate on how it's designed out by being a liquid versus
Molten
being a
salt
solid?
reactor is essentially a tank made of stainless steel filled with a molten salt with heat exchanger introduced to it to get heat out of the core. That's basically the design. And as such, it's not pressurized. It doesn't carry internal energy. And because the fuel is already in liquid form, it allows you, as long as molten salt is not boiling, and boiling temperature is very high, it's not expected to boil under any conceivable conditions, you're going to dissipate heat much faster. So that makes reactor inherently safe from our perspective. Other designs, to put it in more broad technology terms, use ceramic materials. It means that temperature, when they can be damaged, is very, very high. So, and they go to another extreme. They, instead of just melting itself and making that as a premise for safety, in that case, we're saying the damage temperature is so high that reactor is going to reject heat naturally and dissipate it much faster than it's going to ever reach that temperature. So for those reactors, core melting is not part of the consideration. It's not possible. And then the third consideration to that is when you consider pressurized systems, and current reactors carry 15 megapascals pressure in them to operate. These reactors with liquid metals, they are ambient. There's no pressure, there's no internal energy stored in them. And that in combination together makes this much more advanced and safer. Because temperature is higher, efficiency is high, rejection is less, they would rely less on rejection systems. So we're expecting that thermal pollution would be less as well. Mm-hmm.
Can you review again what the new reactors do to be more sustainable in terms of creating less waste?
All of them, especially fast reactor ones, and thermal reactor probably wouldn't carry that feature fully, but fast reactor ones would be fueled with a combination of spent fuel, that's right now nuclear waste, and would be able to produce essentially no nuclear waste at the end. So they designed in such a way that byproduct would be a rather short-lived combination of nuclides that's not going to be in the environment millions of years. That's basically the idea. It would take care of nuclear waste problem, and at the same time, the historical design behind nuclear power is to make sure that reactor not only destroying nuclear waste, but also generating new fuel for itself, and then destroying it in operation. So the fast reactors would be capable to do that. And that's mostly because of the use of high energy particles in efficient process.
Thanks for a very interesting presentation. Could you comment on potential application of cogeneration with the process industries?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't.
Can you comment, please, on any possibility of cogeneration with the process industries, like chemical industry, refining, and things like that?
So this is what we think application areas are for all high temperature reactors on this list. So with about 1,000 degrees temperatures out of the reactor and going into heat exchanger, so we believe that this would be attractive and reactors designed essentially for just sole purpose, not electricity generation, but process heat application. So that would be the path for those reactors. And by design, because they designed like that, they get a little bit penalized. They're not as effective on electricity generation, but the vendors developing those designs hoping that process heat at those temperatures would become attractive.
Would you specifically address which of these reactors require nuclear fuel reprocessing outside of the reactor environment? And the second question, are any of these the thorium reactors, or all of them burning uranium?
Can you say it louder? Okay.
My first question is, would you identify which of these reactors require the nuclear fuel reprocessing outside of the reactor? I understand that was basically banned by President Carter because it was simply difficult and dirty. And
Well, yes. So there are two concepts. The traditional concept would involve processing of the fuel outside of the reactor and essentially off-site of the nuclear power plant. The second concept, integral reactor, assumes that the fuel is produced on-site within essentially boundaries of the nuclear power plant. The third one relates to molten salt reactor that also involves on-site fuel processing that makes a system essentially a closed system from the environmental standpoint. About 30 years ago, Argonne National Laboratory did run experiments with one of the earlier fast reactors at that time to test an idea whether you would be able to, on the same site, operate a reactor and then also manufacture fuel for that reactor. So that was quite promising. So that is expected to come back at some point.
What is the current state of the art in terms of power generating capacity, and how do the new designs compare? Are we looking at more like smaller reactors, but many of them, or are we looking at building larger installations?
That depends on the energy grid, because if you ask this question, folks from General Electric or Westinghouse, they will follow energy grid design. If energy grid is centralized, then larger power plants will become more competitive, and they sell 1,000 megawatt electric units for that purpose. At the same time, there is a wave of what we call small modular reactors that go to about maybe 300 megawatt and as low as maybe 2-3 megawatt electric, that would be designed to be comparable with fossil fuel plants to essentially support distributed energy grid. When you have decentralized energy sources, the small units would go in many, many different locations. The premise of small modular reactors is that you would build them essentially like cars in very, very large numbers. And then economics are supposed to support a business case for them. So it's driven more on energy grid side rather than reactor side. So from a reactor side, it's whatever grid demand is. But the belief is that if reactor is smaller, then the commercial risk is much, much lower than for conventional nuclear power plant today.
Well, thank you very much, Professor.
Sure. Should we go to the last slide?
Well, first we're going to thank you and give you a little present.
Thank you very much.
And I wanted to say something to this audience on small modular reactors. I've recently had discussions with the Nuclear Energy Institute. They're based in Washington, D.C. Yep. Because I and a few colleagues, many of the colleagues are electrical engineers, think that there is an application of small modular reactors in large industrial areas relative to cogeneration, Vic. So I've begun that discussion. All right, so let's go to the answer slide.
Where is the end? All right.
Okay, so about 100 in the U.S. and about 500 worldwide. So now I need my other granddaughter to pull out of the bag, and we'll see if we can get a winner. So Sasha's going to pull. No, don't look for our names. Yeah, look the other way. Okay, so is this have the right answer? No. Well, what were the letters on the answer? We got C and B. Is it B for the first one and C for the second one? B and C. So that one was wrong. Just throw that one away. That was a bad one, too. No. Oh. Did you get it? B and C. Okay. Priyanka Wozniak. Oh, well, congratulations. And we have a gift for you. Come on up here. Where was her gift? Oh, here it is. Here it is. Okay. Well, congratulations. About 6 people didn't have the right answer, but you did. Thank you. Okay, our next dinner meeting is going to be on May 9th at the Bougainvilleas on the west side. And we're going to have a discussion, a presentation by Dr. Fanju Meng about resiliency from extreme weather events. It's another global warming solutions presentation. Thank you, Professor. Everyone drive safely.